We're going to go over something that seems like it should be really, really simple if you're coming from another engine like Unity. But in Godot is actually a little bit more complicated, and it's because of a fundamental difference in the way Unity and uh, Godot are structured in their architecture. So all we're going to do today is we just want to make a ground and a ball and have the ball fall on the ground. Now, if you are coming from Unity, you probably know you can just instance a mesh and it'll already have like stuff like physics already built into it. So you might say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. I want to do a mesh. I'll do a mesh instance 3D. And whatever that is, it's sort of like, wait, I don't see anything. What you have to do is come up here to the mesh instance 3D and you can see the mesh is empty. So we could define a whole new mesh with an array. Let's just do our ground though, and let's just say this is a box mesh. And so we'll call this ground. Okay, so here we go. And then we say, well, wait, how do I resize this? I don't see any resizable things. You actually have to come up here and go to its properties and say, okay, I want it to be like 10 by 10, right? And if you wanted to give it a material, this is where you would do it as well. So you would have to add a material to it, or you can just do a surface material override. And with the surface material override, you could define a new material. So it already has a material, like a default material, so I'm not going to worry about that yet. If we decide to do that, we'll get into how to do that. But the other thing, of course, we're going to need, since this is see, we're going to need a camera since we're in a 3D scene. Oh, and now that's parented to the ground. That's a little weird. So add child node. We'll just say a node 3D, and we'll just say this is our world. And then we're going to reparent this to our world. We're going to, let's see, scene root. So that's already a lot of stuff that you don't have to do in Unity, right? You don't have to have like this world scene. But the reason we have to do it here is because now we actually have a root node for attaching other things to build our scene. So in Godot, whether you're making a scene like a level or a world or whatever, or if you are just making a player character or some object that you want to reuse, like if we wanted to make this ground reusable, we would make that its own separate scene, and that's sort of akin to making it a prefab in Unity. Um, so we have to do a little bit of extra work, but hopefully we'll see why this is beneficial in a bit. Okay, so now we have this camera. The camera is kind of funky. Move it, and let's kind of rotate it down at our ground. We can preview. What does this look like? All right, cool. Now, if we run our game, it's not going to look like that, right? We have to define a main. We'll just say select current, save our world scene, and it'll run. Oh, and now it doesn't look anything like what we just saw in the preview. Why is that? Well, because we also have to have a light source, and then we could add an environment. Now in our editor, it adds those for us so that we can see what the heck's going on. But in the actual scene, we haven't added them yet. But Godot makes it pretty easy to just say, yeah, give me the same environment and give me the same sun. Puts the sun right there at the origin. Who cares? It's an omnidirectional light. It can go wherever it wants. I do actually like to move it just because it looks weird. So I'll move it here, but you can see its direction is straight down. We wanted to have interesting shadows, we can change the direction of it, but it really doesn't matter where it is as far as like how things are lit. Okay, so now let's run this again, and we can see, oh hey, there's our ground, cool. And it's not going anywhere, it's just a mesh, right? It doesn't have any physics interaction yet. So let's do a couple more things. What we said the goal of today is to just make a ball fall and hit the ground. So let's make another mesh instance 3D. We'll call this ball. We'll move that up. Oh, and of course it doesn't have anything visible yet. We need to add something. So let's add our sphere mesh right there. Okay, and so we can see because of the sun, now it has a shadow. That's cool. Look at that. Sweet. All right, now let's run our game. And again, nothing happens because we haven't told Godot, hey, this thing has a body and here is how it should move. Okay, so what we have to do for our ground, we're going to need to add a body. So let's do body 3D and see what we've got. Well, we've got static body 3D, which is a 3D physics body that can't be moved by external forces. When moved manually, it doesn't affect other bodies in its path. That's probably good for ground, right? But let's just take a look at what else there is. Character body, well, that sounds like a player. Well, the ground isn't a player. This is specialized for characters moved by script. Well, this is ground. We don't expect to move it. We do have a rigid body, which is moved by a physics simulation. Well, that sounds like what we want for the ball. But for our ground, we just want a static body 3D. So let's add that. And now we get this warning error, and it says this node has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. Well, we definitely want some sort of collision to happen with the ground, and it says consider adding a collision shape 3D. What I'm going to do is I'm going to name this actually the ground body, and then just to keep this clear, the icons do it, but ground mesh, I'm going to parent this there. And then what I can do is right here in our editor under mesh, if I click on here, it says create tri-mesh static body. Well, I already have a body. I just want a collider. So what I can do is just create a tri-mesh collision sibling. Tri-mesh is pretty slow. So we could use just a single convex collision sibling. It's pretty fast, so let's just do that. And suddenly our error is gone. So that's great. We now have a collision shape that overlaps our mesh perfectly. Now the other way we could do this is take this away. We get the error again. We say add collision shape 3D. And now we get yet another error, and it says a shape must be provided for collision shape 3D to function. Please create a resource shape for it. And where is that? It's all the way over here in shape. So we could say box shape, and now we would have to like manually set this to be the same size as our mesh. And now it overlaps perfectly. But let's just revert to having this single convex collision sibling. So what that does is tells Godot, hey, automatically create a collision shape for me and parent it to my parent. So parent it to the ground. So let's do exactly the same thing for the ball. So first of all, I'm going to add a, well, this time we're going to use a rigid body because this is going to be moved by physics. We're going to call this the ball body. Reparent the mesh to it. Okay, so we can say this is ball mesh, and then this is its collision shape 3D. Now, theoretically, because that's a physics object, when we hit play, it should fall because it's being affected by physics. So let's see what happens. Oh, and there we go. Now, there's a couple things we could do. We've got this body. It's got all these different characteristics. We've got its gravity scale, all this stuff. We could set it. We can add a physics material, and we can say, you know, how rough is it? How much bounce does it have? So let's give it some bounce. Happens. Oh, and now it bounces. So now it's more like a basketball or something. Cool. So the point is, in Godot, it's just a little bit of a different workflow because the architecture of Godot is fundamentally different. Godot is not an entity component system. It is object oriented. So each of these nodes in our inspector is an instance of an object. this ball body is an instance of the class rigid body 3D. And we've attached children to it, which is Godot's way of doing components, but it's done at a higher level. It's not that we're taking the class of rigid body and extending it by like adding a component to that class. Instead, we have a rigid body 3D that expects to have a child node that is a collision shape 3D. And within the child or within the collision shape, it has a component that is the actual shape. So it's a different way of doing components. It's at a higher level. I would really advise reading the Godot documentation on this and seeing why they decided to do it this way. It has to do with how Godot is structured under the hood, how the different systems that are in place within the engine work, and that allows Godot to be much lighter weight than, say, Unity. And so, with Unity, it takes like half an hour for it to start, and Godot just fires right up. So now, so that's kind of the gist. But this is how you would do this simple project of just making a ball fall onto the ground. So I hope this helps. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you